Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and I don't know what, this is video number 5 for this, 4, I don't know. I think I say that in every video. We're going to mount the motor. So last video we got the crank and the transmission and the case halves put together. As you can see, here it sits. We're going to mount it up in there. There's this factory mounting bolts. I moved all the parts, kind of organized it, but if you've done this 1,000 times you just know where things go. So I'm going to mount the motor and I'll go over the torque specs. I'm not really going to talk much in this video. I'm just going to show you what we're doing to put it back together because you watched me take it apart. So it's just the reverse steps. I'll stop the music or whatever I'm playing to tell you the torque specs for stuff. But that's about it. This is going to be a easy video to edit at least. So we're going to mount the motor first. And then we're going to do the left-hand side of the case, so flywheel, starter, the gear for that, the cam chain, and the tensioner arm, and all that stuff. So let me mount you on a tripod. I got to get an extension cord because the battery dies in like 30 seconds. And we will get this mounted. I don't know how far we're going to go in this video. I'll probably save the top end stuff for its own video just so I can go over ring gap and how to measure your rings and all that stuff. So let's get to it. First thing, we're going to mount the top bolt to the bracket, then we can swing the motor in. It's much easier that way. All 3 engine bolts are torqued to 40 foot-pounds. Make sure this is still smooth. Next is your woodruff key. Your tensioner rod, this actually fell out, so I got to undo the bolt on the bottom, slide this back up. You're going to want to lube this. And then we're going to pre-fill it before we start the bike because I've actually had this seize in there from lack of oil. So slide this in first. The smaller end of the spring will go up in it and then the bolt goes on the bottom of that. Next is the flywheel. These are your needle bearings. Make sure it goes in here. I lube them up even though they came out of a working engine or a running engine, kind of. It doesn't hurt. And when installing it, make sure this notch is where your woodruff key goes. And don't force it on. If it doesn't go on right away, pull it off, readjust, put it on. You never want to push it on with the nut. That's how you're going to break stuff. You'll feel it if it goes on right. Washer and nut. Make sure your rod doesn't go in the engine. This is torqued to 47 foot-pounds. A tool that helps is a clutch flywheel holder. You just kind of thread it on and tighten it down. Next is the starter gear. A rod and the spacer. Lines up, make sure the crank's out still. That's everything there. We're going to put the cover on. Don't forget dowel pins, one there, your gasket. Make sure you clean this too.
Some of their operators to a fully loaded tin attachment. Those who play the game day in and day out,
these two are the short bolts. The rest are all the same length. Next is that little tiny pin. Goes in the hole that's right there. And then you're going to want the little gear. This is for your oil pump. Make sure you push it down because clearly it was not fitting. So you're going to want to do this spacer. You'll see the difference between this one and your clutch spacers. Now put your woodruff key on. Next is this big gear. You'll see where the woodruff key goes on. Slides on like that. Now we're going to do the oil pump. So if you remember, this didn't have dowel pins and it's supposed to. So put 2 dowel pins in. I'll put the part number in on the screen somewhere, but you should have your own. All these bolts are the same. When you're putting the pump on, make sure the gear slides on with the pump gear, or the pump gear slides on to that gear we put on. Otherwise it'll get bound up and they'll snap. You'll know when the pump's in or if it's not. These are like 9 foot-pounds, so just a little bit past tight. Next is the gear fork selector. I don't even know what this is called. The spline part. This is actually where your shifter lever mounts. It's going to slide into this hole down here, and then you'll see that there's this little gap here with these 2 poles. There's actually a post that comes out and it slides onto there. When you put it in, do it carefully because you have the oil seal on the other side. It just kind of floats in. Bend this down. You'll see it slide over that, and then this goes on the notches on the star. Next we're going to do the clutch. So there's a few pieces. First is the spacer. It's thick, can't miss it. Next is another spacer. You can tell the difference because it's nice and shiny. This one actually goes in your clutch basket, like so. Make sure that's clean. Is your oil plate. This is what actually lubricates your clutch. Oil puddles in here, your clutch goes through it. Yada yada, biggie bang. You have to put this on at the same time, otherwise you'll never get it on. So we're going to slide this on while holding the plate. Once this is on, you can let go of the plate and it bolts right up. Just be careful because we're putting it on a spline and you don't want to mess it up. It may take you a few tries. Once it's on, it will slide all the way on. You'll see the basket slides on, but the clutch doesn't. Back it off, rotate it, wiggle it, it will go on eventually, like that. Now we can put these two bolts. If you kept them together, they're 10 mils. So it holds the oil plate on, lubrication plate, something like that. Again, these are like 9 foot-pounds, so just a smidge past tight. You'll feel it if you've taken an engine apart or bolted on things. Next, washer and castle nut. The clutch uses the smaller washer, or the smaller castle nut compared to the spinner, and the washer most likely is still on your clutch basket. I just removed it for video purposes. Slides on there. Your castle nut. This is that tool. It was linked in the previous video. I'll link it in this one. Your expensive nickel. They make a tool for this, but a nickel works great. You can see mine, it's well destroyed. Used many times. Put it in that gear. Spin this on. And this is torqued to 47 foot-pounds. Don't forget to take the nickel out and put your bearing in. Next is your spinner, self-explanatory. Slides on, matches the splines. It will slide on eventually. And another castle nut and washer, again 47 foot-pounds. This uses the same tool but the larger end. This also can use the nickel, but you gotta do it from the bottom, or the flywheel holder tool will work, but I always use the nickel. Once you got pressure on the gears, the nickel gets sucked up in there, holds. Make sure you grab the nickel. Now we're going to do the gasket and the plate. So the gasket, it's one of those things, you could probably use this for the entire life that you own the Grom. The right thing to do is replace it all the time, but this one is in perfect shape, so we're going to use it again. No really reason to change it. Make sure you put the plate on with the flat end facing this part. I've had many of them that were installed this way. Obviously the gasket's on the other side and that does nothing. Be careful doing these. They can snap. I've seen many snapped. I've replaced many snapped ones. They're just 9 foot-pounds, so just a little bit of pass tight. I use the impact because I've used it so many times. I know the power of it when I need to stop. Next is the side cover. I've already cleaned, so this is another thing. This gasket, same with the left side, you can use that gasket forever if you're careful with it. I've used one gasket on my own bike for almost 12,000 miles and I just replaced it just because. This one actually ripped, so it's getting a whole new gasket. So the old gasket, I already scraped some of this off on here. I use a little blade to scrape it off. Just be very careful not to gouge this because you don't want it to leak. I'll do the same for the cover before I put it on. We're going to need to put dowel pins in. The one goes here and then one goes on this side down at the bottom. They're actually the same dowel pins you use for the oil pump. Don't forget your screen. Quick note when installing, make sure this is still there because that is what pushes on your clutch bearing, and make sure you have this jet. When you're doing like the Katako clutch cover, make sure that jet stays in the cover. I've seen it stay in the bike. You don't see it, you clamp down that cover, it'll crack. Just like that. All the bolts are the same size. Some of these bolts have your hose or your wire holders for your O2 sensor. So just make sure they go in the right spot. Tall one goes up top as it holds your spark plug wire, coil wire, and O2 sensor wire. I always put this on just so nothing gets inside. These are all 9 foot-pounds, so tighten them up and then just go a little bit farther. These can snap, so don't over tighten them. So actually you gotta put the clutch on first. We're not gonna bolt that one on yet because the intake's in the way. That'll be one of the last things we do. One of the last things we're going to do is the starter. I should have done this way earlier, but we can put it in now. This side's got the ground, goes on the bolt, so don't forget that. Like everything else, 9-ish foot-pounds, so just one little ug-a-dug. Then we're going to plug it in. Like so. So we got the motor mounted. Both sides done. Everything torqued down. The next video, we'll do the top end and get the intake and all that stuff put on and do a few heat cycles. And that'll be the end of this build. So thank you guys for watching. I hope all this information, anything in this video helped you. I'll have all the torque specs and whatnot. Well, not torque specs. I always say that and never do it. Tools that I used for this video will be in the description, as well as links to all the other past videos. I look like shit because I'm tired and it poked my eye. But I appreciate you watching. Subscribe, guys. And yeah, any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll see you on the next video. Later.